All right. So recording is on. So Betty, I don't know if you're starting or
Ready for me to take it?
yeah, it's all you.
Take it away.
Great, thanks.
I want to thank everybody for attending this webinar. Our goal is to update Poudre Canyon's Community Wildfire Protection Plan. This is the first meeting in this process with more to come. If you have questions, please ask them or put them in the chat section and we'll try to answer them. We have a core planning group that's helping us with this meeting and with developing our Community Wildfire Protection Plan. You're going to meet some of them tonight on this call. First is Max Erickson. You want to wave at him, Max? He's the supervisory forester for the Fort Collins Field Office for the Colorado State Forest Service. The Colorado State Forest Service provides technical assistance to organizations like ours to develop our Community Wildfire Protection Plan. Derek Rosenquist. Derek, you want to acknowledge yourself? I said, where'd he go? He's a sergeant with Emergency Services Unit for Larimer County. It's the county agency that responds to wildland fires in our district in Larimer County. Gretchen Ruening and Matt Marshall are from the Larimer County Conservation District. Rachel will be speaking in a few minutes. The Larimer County Conservation District's forestry program works to bring technical expertise, funding, and project management to forest restoration projects in Larimer County. They work with private landowners, partnering organizations, and logging contractors to plan, implement projects utilizing the best available science. The goals of the Larimer County Conservation District's forestry project is to reduce the risk of wildfire, improve wildlife habitat, and enhance forest health and resilience. Daniel Boker is the Forest and Fire Project Manager for the coalition of the Poudre River Watershed. I'll try and say that 10 times real fast, right? The coalition is the 501c3 not-for-profit organization based in Fort Collins with a mission to improve and maintain the health of the Poudre River watershed through community collaboration. The coalition was formed after the High Park fire in 2012 and works on watershed planning, river restoration, forest health, and post-fire restoration by collaborating with many local, state, federal, and non-governmental partners. Then Chief Hugh Collins and myself, Betty Blindy, the Assistant Chief from Poudre Canyon Fire Protection District, also serves on this core committee. The Poudre Canyon Fire Protection District encompasses a little over 90 square miles. It goes along Highway 14 from Gateway Park to Poudre Falls. It has 4 fire stations in the population areas of the district, which are Poudre Park, Rustic, Spencer Heights, and Manhattan Creek. 80% of the district is U.S. Forest Service land. There are approximately 750 full-time residents in the district and another 750 part-time residents. The district has been impacted by both the High Park fire and the Cameron Peak fires. In 2007 and 2008, we developed our first Community Wildfire Protection Plan. That plan identified that we needed better firehouses and better firefighting equipment. In the 14 years from that time, the plan was developed, we have built 3 new firehouses and we have put in new Type 6 engines at each one of the fire stations. In updating the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, we want to identify risks and prioritize actionable projects and actions to reduce wildfire risk in our district. Having an updated Community Wildfire Protection Plan will allow us to apply for funding to do mitigation work in our district and enable us to meet with the Forest Service to better protect communities within our district. Now I'd like to turn over the meeting to Max Erickson with the Colorado State Forest Service.
Thanks, Betty, for a great intro on community wildfire protection plans and updating this one here in Poudre Canyon Fire Protection District. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what community wildfire protection plans are and what we're looking to do with this group here. So community wildfire protection plans were signed into our Congress through the Healthy Forest Restoration Act back in 2003. And that really enabled local communities to define their wild and urban interface area and, define projects and risk to identify or to manage those risks. And so a part of that act gave the local state forestry agencies the responsibility to define and guide minimum standards for implementing community wildfire protection plans. So as a part of those community wildfire protection plan minimum standards here in Colorado, there's really three big components to them. It's the plan participants, which is you all, the community here, the core team that we have, and the larger community practitioners that are working out in this landscape. There's the components of the plan itself, which identify the boundary of which we're doing this assessment, the risk characteristics we see across there, including fire behavior and fuels around the entire area. And then finally, just a level of specificity that, allows this community to really change, the landscape out there and reduce that risk that you identify. And so I'd like to just hit on again the plan participant part of this. Betty mentioned the core team that is a part of this process here. And that's one of the requirements of the minimum standards. And that team really helps set the leadership and the direction of this plan and make sure we can implement it down the road. So I'd like to just briefly thank everybody for participating in that, but also thank the community themselves for showing up tonight. We're going to need you all throughout this entire process to give us your feedback and input and the local knowledge that you have in your community to address these risks. This is the first meeting that we're going to do that. And it's a really critical part of this plan itself, and also why we include it as a part of our minimum standards. We'll also be engaging with a lot of our local community practitioners. So those will be other nonprofits that are working in the area, U.S. Forest Service, some other state agencies, folks that have a stake in this particular landscape and will help us, work together and provide resources to do the projects that we are going to identify throughout this plan. So again, I'd just like to thank everybody for being here tonight. It's going to be a great process and a great turnout to get this thing updated. And with that, I will kick it to the next person, which I believe is Gretchen.
Thank you, Max. Good evening, everyone. I have the pleasure of reporting back some of the results from the survey that Betty sent out through the Fire Protection District. So thank you, everyone who may have already responded to the survey. We got 22 responses so far, so keep those coming. Pass them on to your neighbors. Let's get some more responses and feedback. So yeah, we had a lot of similar themes across the board for the survey. It's pretty clear that the community up there is pretty engaged and provided some really good feedback. First survey question had to do with wildfire risk and the perceived risk. So the majority of folks who responded reported back that they believe that the area up there is in medium to high risk, so probably pretty accurate there. Some of the concerns about wildfire issues, just to sum those up, a lot of stuff around the lack of defensible space that might already be done up in that landscape, lack of fuel mitigation, particularly on neighboring properties, so either private land or U.S. Forest Service land. Some other concerns had to do with home materials, if homes were built with a lot of woody material, the home ignition zone was a big thing. Some folks definitely acknowledged that wildfire is an inherent risk of living in the mountains, so it's good to hear that, but it's also good that we're working on the CWPP together. Some other things had to do with ingress and egress out of these communities. So in terms of barriers to fuel mitigation, we saw a lot of common themes there as well. None of them were too surprising. Of course, cost is a huge barrier to getting this work done. So there's a lot of comments about that. A lot of comments around the ability to find labor or contractors to get the work done. Another theme there had to do with dealing with the material that was generated from this fuel mitigation work. So all the slash and limbs, how do you deal with the slash and limbs if you can't burn piles or it's really expensive to chip and haul them off site? Let's see what else. We've got physical limitations. So, especially some of the folks were saying that, as they get on in years, it's harder to get this work done themselves. And then also some concerns around doing this work and then having it affect their property value or curb appeal. The cool part about this survey that I really liked reading about was the perceived strengths of the community. It was really cool to hear how much unity and cohesion is already up there in the Poudre Canyon. So really good to hear that that's a common theme, and it sounds like people are ready to get working together. It sounds like there was a lot of support already for the fire protection district and a lot of respect for the folks that are up there working every day. So it's good that we've got you guys advocating for this, Betty. In terms of weaknesses in front of wildfires, there was a lot of comments around part-time residents that might not be aware of the issues or can't get the work done themselves because they live out of state. Similarly, tourists and campers were a big concern with campfires around those camping areas and just a lack of patrolling presence with those campers. Let's see what else. There was, let's see, a lot of the same things we've already talked about, but one of the concerns that kind of jumped out at me when I was going through this was some complacency perhaps around wildfires after having these two big fires that have come through this community in the past 10-12 years, and thinking that the wildfire risk is gone now. And so that was good to hear that that's on folks' minds too as well. Let's see, how can the community improve wildfire resilience? There was a lot of good comments about that in terms of needing to have more coordination and communication, a lot more education around some of the issues that folks can take on themselves. A lot of comments about needing more funding or more incentives to get this work done. Let's see, there was a lot of need for more home inspections for that defensible zone and how people can do some better work around their homes. And then let's see, the last part was a question about if anyone wanted to learn more about forest health and fuel mitigation. And most folks either said yes or maybe. So that was good to hear as well. So I will kick it off to the next person. And I believe that's Daniel. So I'll kick it off to you, Daniel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Gretchen. Appreciate it. Thank you all for being here tonight. And for anybody that's going to watch the recording after, hopefully this will be quite a resource for you all as you get into this process. And the first thing I want to say, well, first, I'm Daniel. I'm a forester with the Coalition for the Poudre River Watershed. Betty gave a very nice introduction for what CPRW does and what we represent in the landscape. We have a watershed focus, and we're really looking at things that increase the health and resilience of the overall watershed. To me, that includes the human infrastructure and the communities that are within this watershed, right? It all works together. And so the first thing I would say to you all as a community is I applaud you for undertaking this process. It's not super quick, it's not super easy. You'll have to talk to each other and figure things out and hammer out the details and all kinds of fun stuff over the next few months, but it is a very valuable process. And it's a way for, I mean, I don't live up there. I live in Fort Collins. I have a lot of good relationships up in the mountains. We think a lot about what can be done and those relationships and how we put projects together and that kind of thing. But we don't want to come in and tell people what they should do. The beauty of the CWPP process is that it is community driven. You all are getting together as a community with the high respect you obviously have for your fire district and thinking through this from a community perspective. And then the partners that you see here tonight and other ones that aren't with us tonight, we are here to support you and help you through that process. So, that's the first thing I want to say is congratulations on taking the first step and saying we, as a community, this is something we need to do. We are in a different landscape than we were 100 years ago, fairly obviously. We've all experienced that over the past few decades. fires and floods and things like that. And it's a big risk to face. And, going through this process is the first step really in facing that risk and figuring out what you can do about it. And so as far as the process and that kind of thing, you've heard a really good introduction from Betty and Max and Gretchen about kind of how this will happen and some of the concerns that you all have that you want to address and all that kind of thing. I will just tell a story about kind of how this has been happening in the landscape. So as you might know, Glacier View Fire Protection District undertook this process a while back. It took them about a year to get through the whole process, or at least several months. They contracted it out. You guys are doing it in-house. There's lots of different ways to do this, but the important idea is, you get all the people together, you have these meetings, you figure out the concerns, and you do the modeling, and you end up with this document that is really going to help you prioritize those things that you can do to reduce your risk in the landscape. And so Glacier View FPD went through this a while back. They had a lot of good community buy-in, as I can tell that you guys do as well. Took community meetings and knocking out the document and all that kind of thing. And now they have a really good plan for how to go about reducing their risk in the landscape. One of the things that we did face sort of towards the end of that process was, some questions from the community about, hey, now we got this big document. What do we do? Is it all up to us to take this thing and put it into practice? And I think the short answer to that is no. We're all here to help think through that, to find the funding, to put together the projects, to think at that landscape scale, to find the contractors, to deal with the slash, all that kind of stuff. It's not on individual landowners. It's not on individual communities. It's on everybody that lives in this watershed to figure those things out. That's what we're all here for. So, I think the Glacier View story is really interesting because, they went through the ups and downs of the process, ended up with a great document, got over that fear of, oh my gosh, we've got this great plan, but how do we do it? And then we've come to the point now where we have helped, and I say we, when I say we, I'm talking CPRW, State Forest Service, Conservation District, DFPC, Sheriff's Office. Everybody works together as part of this, what we call the Northern Colorado Fireshed Collaborative. It's an umbrella organization with all of our organizations. We're all meeting together. We just had a 2.5-hour meeting earlier today. And, we're thinking about this stuff kind of at that landscape scale. How do all our organizations fit in? What pieces do we bring to that process? And we were able to help Glacier View think through, all right, next steps. Let's think about implementing the CWPP. We have all these priorities for roadway evacuations, for defensible space implementation, for larger scale, landscape scale projects that will reduce fire intensity as it approaches the community. And so we have all these things kind of in place. How do we put them into practice? Well, the Fireshed helped the Glacier View District, along with 2 others that were ready in this process that had their CWPPs done. That was Glen Haven and Estes Valley, that also had very recent, new CWPPs that went through this process. We helped all those 3 apply for a large scale, several $million-dollar grant through a new grant program through the U.S. Forest Service. And you all have probably heard, either through the grapevine or maybe you check the Federal Register, stuff like that. But people are paying attention in Washington at this point. They know there's a risk. They know there's need. Grant programs are starting to come out with Bs instead of Ms, billions of dollars. There's money coming down that we can use to help communities figure out how to reduce their risk. And so that's what we wanted to do with those 3 communities that were ready, had their CWPPs signed, really good plan, solid, action items ready to go. And we helped them apply for several $1 million in grant funding. We don't know if we'll get that, but we're knocking on wood, and we think we put in a really good application. But part of what we were trying to do in that application, and now I'll make it kind of Glacier View specific, because these are, what we wanted to do with that process was tailor it to the community's needs. Glacier View's needs are different than Glen Haven's, and they're different from Estes Valley's. And they had different needs for their fire districts, for their communities, for the programs that we wanted to think through and help them provide. But what we asked for Glacier View in particular were several things. We asked for time for a coordinator. This stuff takes a lot of work. Everybody's pretty busy. A lot of you folks may be retired or even part-time, that kind of thing. You know, as far as who's going to put together all these projects and find the money and run it and all that kind of thing, you need that kind of time. So we put in money for a full-time coordinator to help think through this, coordinate and organize all that stuff. We asked for a chipper. They needed a chipper. I think that's something that can plug in up there and we can help them figure out and run a chipper program that can reduce risk, especially around those private parcels in the communities themselves. We asked for some money for some of our organizations to help out. You know, again, it takes time and effort to go into this. And so our organizations need that support to come in and be able to come up and go for a walk on your property and say, yes, I would take these trees. No, these look good. Yep, mow everything within 5 feet. We are partnering with the sheriff's office. They've got a new program coming out that's going to provide a full-time person to do a lot of home assessments. And so we're figuring out how to work together with them to actually go door to door and think through the risk on those particular parcels. We also asked for a lot of money for implementation for actual acres and parcels treated. And what we want to do is, based on the prioritization in that CWPP, treat the 200 highest risk parcels as far as defensible space, home ignition zone, that kind of thing. And we asked for a bunch of money to do that. We also asked for quite a bit of money to do some more landscape scale treatments. So up to, 10, 20, 50, 100 acres, that kind of thing on HOA owned open spaces. So those areas, they aren't individual landowner properties, but some of them are pretty strategic. And that's been interesting. Kind of as an aside, I took a look with some folks up in Glacier View Meadows the other day at an area that they were looking at because they thought, man, if a fire comes up out of this canyon and gets into Elkhorn Creek and then runs up to the top, it's going to burn down all these houses at the top. So that was their perspective on it. I came out and helped them look at that, and we were thinking through treatment options and that kind of thing. And I'm starting to realize, and this is a really important parcel piece here, because if it burns hot, not only is it going to carry fire straight into this community, but it's also going to dump a bunch of sediment and ash and stuff like that straight into the river, which is a huge problem for everybody and all the downstream users. So that's kind of the perspective we're trying to bring. What can we all do to help prioritize those projects, to treat those acres, to treat those homes, protect the community, and then think about the watershed resilience and water quality and forest habitat, all those kinds of things. So we ask for a lot of those components. I think, let's hope that's going to be very successful. And if we can get off the ground with that, it's a 5-year grant program. They had to have a CWPP completed within the last 10 years to apply for that. And so, we're trying to help Crystal Lakes take that same model and come online with their CWPP as well. That's either signed or real close. Is that right, Max? Is that official yet? It is, yeah. So that one's official. Crystal Lakes was several months behind Glacier View FPD. Up in Crystal Lakes, it's looking a little different. Their Road and Rec Association is running that process, not their fire district. So, they're figuring out their committee structures and all that kind of thing too. But we think, we being, again, the fireshed and the community together through a bunch of conversations, are trying to come up with ways for them to address their risk up there in this collaborative process. Crystal Lakes looks a lot different from Glacier View. There's a lot of wall-to-wall lodgepole up there. There's a lot of Forest Service ground just to the west. It's a different animal altogether. But through this collaborative process and bringing in the U.S. Forest Service, we're going to figure out how to address their risk as well. And so that's something we're all trying to do, getting Glacier View to the point where they could think through as a community. Again, we're there for support and ideas and say, yep, we can put together that project. If you guys dream it up, we can help you fund it, that kind of thing. But they were able to put together citizen committees to address these risks and to figure out people's responsibilities and who's responsible for this and that kind of thing. Another part of that success at this point is they've got a lot of volunteers out self-organizing and doing a lot of these treatments already. And so they've got 2 or 3 organizations up there that have just kind of come together and said, I've got a saw, I got a tractor, I got a flatbed truck. And they're out there actually pulling wood off of people's parcels, which is wonderful. And that is, at this point, not even grant funded. They're doing it of their own accord. So I think we can take that energy and help figure out the priorities, ramp that up to some kind of, formal structure where the money is available and we can all, as partners and with the community, kind of help ramp this up the scale that we need to be at to address these risks. So I think that was basically what I was going for there. I really see the Poudre Canyon, of course, as you all know, you're a different animal altogether than Glacier View and Crystal Lakes. You're stretched along the river. The federal land is, there's a lot of it, like you said, Betty, 80%, so it'll be a different process thinking through what are your priorities? Is it landscape scale stuff to keep things from rushing down the river, kind of like Cameron Peak started to do from the top? Is it more that community protection? Is it some combination of both? A very unique part of the Poudre Canyon district is the post-fire risk. And, I think that needs to be addressed in this plan in some way because you've got some fairly serious post-fire flooding and erosion risk, as you've seen dramatically with Black Hollow and some other areas over the past couple of years that will be part of this planning process. So it looks different for every spot, but the Fireshade Collaborative, all of our organizations are here to help you think through this, to give ideas, to give feedback, to help you through the process, and to help you figure out once it's done and you've got that plan, where do we get the money? How do we put these projects together? How do we structure our committees? That kind of thing to get to success in this. So I'll end it there, but thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm doing the next steps, and that's where we need your engagement. If you haven't taken that survey, please go to poudrecanyonfiredistrict.org and click on the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. It's on the first page of our website. There you can take the link to the survey. This is Megan, this is where I need the poll thing. We would like to know what is the best way for us to communicate with you. Is it through like the North 40 News, the Next Door, social media, or how? So will you take a minute and click on the best way for us to communicate with you about the development of our Community Wildfire Protection Plan?
And ignore the choice 6. I don't know how that snuck in there, but
looks like email is the best way to go, huh?
great.
Okay, email. You'll be getting
100%.
emails from us then.
All right. Just so you all can see, that's a resounding yes to email.
Yeah. We still will be sending out our newsletter on the progress of the reports, and we'll keep our newsletter updated, our website updated, and that it again is poudrecanyonfiredistrict.org. So now we're at the place where we can ask if you have questions. Does anybody have any questions about what we're trying to do here? Is there any way that you can help us get your neighbors involved in this process? Anybody want to speak?
Looks like Maya was raising her hand. Yeah, there you go.
Hi. First of all, thanks for putting this together. I really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about this process. I have a process question, I guess. So in a district that's 80%, in a district where 80% of the land is owned by the Forest Service, I'm just curious why they're not part of the core planning committee, and also if anybody could address what their role is in the CWPP process. That would be, I'd be really interested to understand that more. Thanks.
Maybe I can jump in here to start. U.S. Forest Service is one of our key partners, and we do intend on having them engaged, particularly in the project and risk identification process. When you look at a landscape in the fire protection district, some of the risk comes from outside, which is the U.S. Forest Service. They are not required to be on the core teams. And I know they've gone through a little bit of turnover, but we are talking with those folks actively about this particular project, and we'll definitely bring them in the fold as quick as we can.
Hi, this is Carl Brown. I'm with the Boy Scout property and have been here in Colorado since '79. I retired from the Forest Service, the USGS, and the National Park Service, and my old ranger district was the Estes Poudre district. So I have a pretty good idea of kind of where the Forest Service is coming from. Yeah, absolutely, they'll be part of this, but you know, they're plugged in. So as you may know, the Boy Scout Ranch is kind of the connecting piece between the Glacier View and the Poudre Canyon section, and we have Forest Service on 3 sides of this. So part of our efforts, first of all, we've been doing mitigation since '86. We've been doing active forest management. Our mitigation on our western end is what saved us when the crown fire came off of Shambhala and came into our stand and went on the ground, went underneath, was able to be fought the way it should be. It's exactly what you want mitigation to do. We have a great example of that on our western boundary right next to Shambhala. So we're also working with the Forest Service on some slivers and holidays is what I'll call them. That's the term that's used in the GIS world, Geographic Information Systems. There's a couple pieces of Forest Service ground that are right between the county road and our property that they are never going to get to. Their crews are working on the Magic Feather burn plan, and they've got a lot of big landscape to work on, and that'll wrap around us, and we're coordinating with them. We're working on a volunteer agreement so that we can actually help treat the stuff that's right next to us, because quite frankly, people drive along the road and they got this piece that's not treated, and then we got ours right behind it that's in great shape, and we'd really like it all to look the same. So we're coordinating with them and working through that. As Max said, part of the challenge is they've had some turnover. They had an acting district ranger. We've worked with that folk, you know, for a long time. So there's discussions there. They are active. They mean well, and we are continuing to do our thing on the Scout Ranch, and we are looking forward to the beginning of the season to be burning piles. We do about 100 piles a year, and we're pretty good at it, and we plan to continue to do that. So yes, that's definitely something that we coordinate with them, and they are an active player. And we look forward to anyone coming onto the Scout Ranch and take a look at what we've done. We're happy to do that, and I'm happy to help with planning and mitigation efforts. I started the whole chainsaw training program for the council there. I'm an old faller from the Forest Service, and so I have wildland fire experience way back into my day. I started LA County Hill Attack in the 70s. Thank you.
Hey, Maya, Dan Escobedo with the state DFPC. I can't speak specifically about what the Forest Service is doing around your neck of the woods there, but they do try to apply a lot of their fuels projects around WUI areas, private land and all that. You may want to tie in, if someone's interested, just trying to see what work they're doing around you and how that works with the CWPP. Because one of the directions of the a strategic direction, at least it used to be, was working around private entities on the forest boundary. So that used to be a priority. I know that still is. But what they're doing specifically in your country, I couldn't tell you.
Daniel, that is the Magic Feather prescribed burn thing that's wrapping all the way around us.
Okay.
And you can find that on their website and there's some good maps that have what they're planning on doing, and that is the area that's right around us, at least one of them. Thank you.
Throw one more comment in there to Maya's question there too. And, you know, great question, Maya. And yeah, they'll definitely be involved as a stakeholder and that kind of thing, as Max said. One thing that's really encouraging with the way they're going about planning in this landscape these days is different from what it used to be. Their new project area is basically going to be everything north of the river. And the way they're looking at this is more of a conditions-based analysis. And you forgive me if you know some of this, you probably already do. But it's more of a conditions-based analysis. So for those areas, and this is really important for those areas that are checkerboarded, like the Poudre Canyon District or Glacier View or Crystal Lakes, you know, more on the west side. But the way, and I'm kind of speaking for them and they're not sitting here, but from the way I'm kind of understanding this might work, for those project areas that are on Forest Service ground that are really important for community protection and for this process and that kind of thing, the new way of planning will enable them, say it's a 40-acre Forest Service piece that really needs to be treated along with some community-owned pieces to make a better project. In the past NEPA process, the way they used to do it, that 40 acres would have to go through that entire review all by itself. Years of review, signing off on all the environmental analysis, all that kind of thing. The new conditions-based NEPA process will allow them to say, if these certain conditions obtain in these certain areas, then these are allowable actions. And so that will really streamline, hopefully really streamline those, the 40 acres that's really hard to get to, because it's easier to manage 4,000 than it is 40, for an organization like that. But, the Black Diamond, that conditions-based process should make those smaller parcels easier to wrap into collaborative treatments with communities. That's really kind of the intent. And anybody else on here that please add or correct me on that, but that's kind of my understanding.
And if you want to get into some of those details, I put some links in the Black Diamond conditions-based NEPA. There's a story map that's helpful in kind of understanding the process there, and there's a lot of great maps. And then Magic Feather is within that Black Diamond landscape, so there's some information for you there as well.
Megan, can you pull up that flyer on the in-person meetings? We are going to be having some in-person meetings in February, and we'd like to invite you and ask you to invite your neighbors to attend. On February 13th, which is a Monday, the Rustic and Spencer Heights community meeting will be at Station 2 in conjunction with the Upper Poudre Canyon Association meeting. And then on February 15th, we'll be meeting with the Manhattan Creek community at Station 4. And on February 17th, we'll be meeting with the Lower Poudre Canyon community at the Lower Poudre Canyon Community Center. And if you need to communicate with us, please communicate with Chief Hugh Collins or myself, Betty Blindy. And I've left you our emails and telephone numbers. So we want to have more communication with the community. Any other questions? Any comments from anybody else? Then I guess it's a good time to sign off, huh? So, thank you for attending.
Thank you, Betty.